Chapter 21. 2:15 a.m. Ice slipped over Sam's soul at Brant's words. At least they'd found her. She'd been waiting for someone to call in this last victim. She wrapped the blankets tighter around her. The cabin temperature had dropped with the news. A blue chill crept through her fingers, and her legs had already turned numb. She tucked her legs under and reached for yet another of the cheap blankets, stacked on the floor beside her. It's her. The one we've been waiting for. The brunette. Her name. Sam's voice caught in the back of her throat. Her name was Caroline. A shadow crossed Brant's face. He nodded to her as he headed downstairs. Brant? Sam raced to the landing. Brant turned to gaze up at her, one eyebrow raised. What? Be careful. He acknowledged her comment with a nod, then he climbed the stairs once more, strode over to her, gave her a seriously dangerous kiss, and walked out of the cabin into the night. 2:55 a.m. On any other day, Brant would have made record time. But it was just after 3 on a Sunday morning, and the Saturday night partiers had the city in full swing. Getting to the city was no problem. Navigating to the crime scene was. Jesus, Brant, you must have had a hot day tonight. You aren't usually this late showing up. The forensic team had already arrived. Brant took their ribbing in good humor, without offering any clue to his whereabouts. Walking into the suburban brick house, the sense of normalcy struck him. How often did a family-oriented neighborhood hide a heinous crime? Regular 2-story homes on city-planned lots surrounded him. Somewhere close would be the elementary school, with a high school a little farther away, and within walking distance would be the standard corner store. Bad things did happen to good people. Grimly he walked into hell. The odor hit him first, the flies second. The crime scene had to be several days old. A body in the heat of summer, decomposed quickly. Photographers worked at detailing every little thing. One of the CSI crew stood over the victim, the flashes from his camera creating an irregular staccato pattern. A victim with brunette hair. Brant stopped in his stride. Among the dried blood and bodily fluids, the pasty white skin shone with an eerie light. Brant struggled for objectivity. He walked through slowly and calmly, giving each area close scrutiny. Not knowing what to search for, yet he knew he'd recognize it when he saw it. At the victim's bedside, all attempts at a cool demeanor vanished. The scene was incredibly familiar. Too familiar. Not the hair, not the features, but the injuries. God, the injuries were all too familiar. Her boyfriend had been out of town. Caroline was supposed to have picked him up at the airport. When she didn't, he'd come looking for her. Hey, Brant. The killer took a trophy this time. With a sinking feeling, Brant turned to face Kevin and Adam. Kevin couldn't wait. He cut off her ear. Christ. Brant paused for a moment to honor the dead woman. Now more determined than ever to catch this killer, he got down to work. 9:10 a.m. Sam checked the roster. 2 new surgical cases to deal with. One still under anesthesia, while the other was awake and definitely pissed. She couldn't blame the poor thing. He was a lop-eared rabbit who'd lost part of an ear to a dog. A large bandage covered the right side of his head. Sam quickly cleaned his cage and moved on. With the basics taken care of, Sam headed to the lunchroom to find a cup of tea. She'd held her thoughts locked up until she saw the lunchroom was empty. With a sigh of relief, she collapsed at the table and dropped her head to her arms. Her heart and mind were a mess. She couldn't help being worried about the Colonel's fate. Maisie was such a warm, loving character, whom Sam hated to see suffering the pain of waiting and not knowing. Brant had been on her mind all morning, then that was to be expected after last night. Her heart smiled as the memories flooded her. Only to be shut down as Deputy Brooker slammed into her thoughts. She looked around nervously. Could he have tracked her to her place of work? The door to the lunchroom opened, startling her. "Good morning, Sam." A chorus of greetings startled her. She smiled at the group of noisy women collecting around her. Somehow she'd created friends without even trying. She didn't know how or why, but found gratitude welling up inside. It helped not to be so alone. Their chatter swelled and receded and swelled again. Sam rode the waves of utterly bewildering topics, from the latest color trend in shoes to the murder victim reported on the morning news. She stayed quiet, not wanting to listen, and yet found it hard not to. The last thing she wanted to do was relive the experience. The thoughts turmoiled around, keeping her off balance and struggling to focus. She worked on keeping her emotions under control. The very name of the victim hurt her deeply. That poor woman. Eventually the coffee break ended, sending everyone to their jobs. The friendly atmosphere followed Sam as she returned to the animals. She realized this was close to the normal life of other people. Instead of an inherent wariness with her guard always in place, other people laughed and joked, at ease with each other. Sam was suddenly hungry for more. Dr. Wascott came to check on the dog, coming out of his drugged state. Sam waited a few minutes, watching the dedicated caring so evident in his actions. When he was done, she brought up the one subject she'd been waiting to discuss. "Sir," she said diffidently, "Soldier has re-injured himself." The vet frowned. "How bad? What did he do?" When she described the wound, the vet nodded. He went over to one of the many floor-to-ceiling cabinets and took out a small tube. "Here is an antibiotic cream. Use this on the open wound for a few days. If it doesn't get better, then you'll have to bring him in." "I don't think he'll like that." The vet grimaced. "Truthfully, neither will I. Only we can't have him getting an infection from his ripped stitches." "Okay, I'll see how he responds to this." Her day almost done, Sam quickly finished up, grabbed the new cream, and headed out. Once free of work, her thoughts automatically returned to the one subject she'd refused to focus on. Caroline. She grimaced. Caroline had become the ultimate victim, and Sam had been acting like one all along as well. She'd let this asshole control her every waking moment, and many of her sleeping ones too. In order to regain control, she had to stop being afraid. In order to control the fear, she had to be progressive. And just how the hell was she supposed to make that happen? The fear wouldn't stop overnight. She'd possibly have it forever. Running a hand over her tired face, Sam vowed to stop letting fear control her. It would take constant vigilance to stay on top of this. She'd been afraid most of her life, and this wouldn't stop simply because she'd decided differently this moment. Still, power welled deep within her. She couldn't just sit here any longer and wait for this killer to pull her strings like a puppeteer. It was time she pulled a few of her own. 9:24 a.m. Finally. Bill punched his heavy fist in the air. Jesus H. Christ, he could die himself before the fucking police actually got their heads on straight. He bet this was all over the internet. Bill rubbed his thick fingers over the top of his almost bald head. He'd need to shave again soon. But now he could relax. His victim had been found. Finally. He was tired but happy. There was no joy when his prize was decomposing, without someone to watch and to fuss over her. He grinned, that lopsided endearing movement as women described it. Before they got to know who and what he really was. How long before the police actually received his surprise? He felt a moment of misgivings at his spontaneous action, then tossed it off. They'd never figure it out. He rubbed his thick hands together and gloated. The gift should be nice and ripe by then. 10:03 a.m. Brant yawned, feeling his face crack and splinter. God, he was tired. He shouldn't have come into work without catching a few hours of sleep, only he'd felt driven by the need to do something constructive. Besides, he might never sleep again. Not after that crime scene. That poor woman had been sliced and diced, and Brant could only feel grateful the killer hadn't been into cooking and eating the body too. The forensic evidence wasn't in yet. The autopsy would be soon. All Brant could do was wait. He laid his head down on his crossed arms on the desk. He'd just rest his eyes for a minute. That's all he needed. His phone rang a little later. Bleary-eyed, he stared, uncomprehending the noisy black machine. Sam. Rubbing his hand over his face, he reached for the receiver. "Hello," he mumbled in a grainy voice. Reaching for his coffee cup, he took a drink to ease his throat. He choked and spluttered on the clammy cold drink, grimaced and drank another sip. Caffeine was caffeine. "Brant, are you okay?" Not Sam. His mother. Damn, he'd forgotten. "Mom, I'm fine." "How's the Colonel?" "He's still unconscious, but he does appear a little more peaceful now." "But he hasn't woken up?" Brant tried to smother a yawn and failed. He needed to talk to the Colonel, if and when that was possible. He wanted to call Sam too, just to hear her voice. A warm light wrapped around his heart. No. Not yet. Maisie sounded as tired as he felt. He hurt for her. It was hard to sit and wait when someone you cared about was hurting. "Brant, are you there?" Brant shook himself. "Yeah, Mom. I'm here." He checked at his watch. "Are you still at the hospital?" "I'm here again now. I went home, had a shower, and came back in. I don't want him to wake up alone. It's almost lunchtime. Why don't I come by and pick you up? We'll go out for a bite to eat together." He could still check in with Sam, take his mom out for lunch, and be back in time to tackle his heaped desk. Maisie hesitated. "Mom, come on. It would be good for both of us." She capitulated. "All right. But just for a bite." Brant checked his watch. "Good. I'll finish up here in another hour or so. Then I'll come by and pick you up." Brant rang off and stretched. He needed to check his emails and talk to his boss. Neither should take too long. Bringing up his emails, Brant checked the couple dozen messages waiting for him. One of them was from the librarian he'd met a couple days ago. The librarian confirmed various ring patterns used over the decades for class rings, and the similarity of the sketch to one used by a specific fraternity. Brant couldn't believe it. Finally, a breakthrough. His euphoria died as he read on. The ring design was in use for close to a decade, with variations by year. Except it had been out of circulation for 2 decades. Over 500 of them could have been purchased. The professor who'd informed the librarian didn't have any dates or names available, as the system wasn't computerized back then. He did offer a few names of other people who might help. Brant weeded through his messages, taking care of priorities. Before leaving for lunch, he walked over to the largest of the file cabinets and carefully hid, then locked, Sam's journal inside. That would do for the moment. "Hey, Brant." Brant turned to find Kevin at the door. "Hey, what's up?" Kevin grinned. "The captain wants to see you. And for a change, I had nothing to do with this one." The grapevine apparently told him about Sam's vision and the latest murder. "How the hell did the grapevine or you even find out?" Kevin shrugged. "I don't know where I heard about it first, but it's true, isn't it?" "Is what true?" "She saw this victim as she died, didn't she?" Brant groaned and closed his eyes. "Shit, did I slip up and say something to Adam? God, I must have been really tired to have done that." Kevin snapped his fingers, almost laughing out loud. "Yeah, that might have been who told me." Captain Johansson's door was ajar when Brandt arrived. He knocked and pushed it open. "Come in, Brandt. Take a seat." The captain gestured toward the single chair not piled high with file folders. Closing the door behind him, Brandt made his way to the lone chair and sat. The captain glanced at him. "Brandt, what's this about your psychic and another murder?" Brandt said, "It's true. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to catch you up on the latest since coming in from the crime scene. You know what will happen if this gets out?" Captain Johansson always had the department's image on his mind. "How close was she?" "Spot on." "Damn." Brandt understood how he felt. It's not as if we're the first department to have used psychics. Brandt swept his arm toward the wide expanse of glass. "Besides, this is department stuff, and the media shouldn't ever know, unless someone tells them." Captain Johansson glared. "What about her? How will you stop her from stepping into the limelight? She could make a huge promo out of this case." "Sam's not the type." Brandt watched in fascination as Captain Johansson's beetle brows crinkled, almost meeting in the center of his forehead. "Everyone is the type. You just need the right circumstances to bring it out." Brandt stared out the window, refusing to be drawn in. Captain Johansson was a hard ass who'd apparently run the department fairly for many decades. His beliefs were little enough to put up with. "Well, I'm saying that Sam isn't like that, but believe what you want." The captain shuffled the papers on his desk. "So what did she see and what did she miss?" It took a few minutes to give him the rundown. Brandt finished with the one thing Sam didn't see. She didn't mention the trophy. And we don't know why her ear was cut off or where it is. That's how it works with psychics. They get some of the information right, and they get a lot wrong. Captain Johansson doodled on a notepad in front of him, obviously deep in thought. "True enough." Brandt leaned forward. "This isn't for discussion with anyone else, but I actually saw her go through a vision." He gave a brief version of what he'd seen at Sam's cabin that night. The memories of the cuts appearing on Sam's fragile body haunted him. "You saw these cuts appear and disappear, and you weren't drunk?" Brandt stared into Captain Johansson's eyes. "God's truth. I swear I watched the cuts appear and then disappear. Blood was everywhere. Jesus, I panicked. Why didn't you call 911? Brandt's lips twisted. "I almost did. I got through to Stefan first." The captain squinted at him. "That would have helped. Did Stefan have answers?" Brandt nodded. "And thank God he did. I would have caused more damage if I'd touched her. Maybe permanently. I don't know what to think about this stuff. However, I know several good cops who swear by Stefan. Sam isn't as strong or as secure in her abilities as Stefan. The good news is he'll help train her. Sam's fragile. She needs to learn to protect herself." Brandt geared for the blow. "And that includes being protected from this department." The captain leaned forward, glaring at Brandt. "What does that mean?" Larger than life, the captain never backed down from a fight. He had no trouble calling a spade, and he always stood by his men. At 6'6", he was built like the football player he used to be. Brandt glared back. "I can't forget about the ring diagram incident. Someone could also take it into his head to release personal information about Sam." He paused. "But why?" The captain pounded his fist. "It wouldn't be someone from here. They'd know the damage something like that could cause the department. More likely to discredit me." He waited a beat. "There's another possible complication." The captain leaned forward. "Let's hear it." Brandt quickly related what he knew about Deputy Brooker and what had been done to Sam years ago, and the couple incidents in the last few days. The captain very clearly, very succinctly said one word: shit. He shifted his great bulk deeper into his chair. It took another few minutes before Captain Johansson spoke again. Bring her in. I think it is time I met this person. And how will I do that? I don't know. That's for you to figure out. Just do it. 10 minutes later, Brant reached Sam by phone. When? Her tone somehow conveyed weary acceptance. Damn, she sounded tired. Today. Now would be good. Now that she'd agreed, he didn't really care. Just the faster, the better. I'm at work. I have roughly another 90 minutes before I'm done. Say about 1:30 p.m. Does that work for you? That would be great. He hung up the phone and then remembered. Crap. His mother. He glanced at his watch. He would be late. Ah, hell. Grabbing his keys, he locked his office and ran.